Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Reviews brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre. I am co-artistic producer Mackenzie, and I am joined by fantastic panelists tonight. Of course, we have the wonderful associate producer Jillian Robinson. Hello, Jill.
I just have to ask, Mac, are you going to keep up with the theme?
Is this the whole episode?
We can do a whole episode on this section. I can do that.
I think, but the state of the world right now, we should maybe bottle up.
Fair enough, Jill. Fair enough.
Or else we send you to Gulag.
Or else we will send you up in 24 hours of makeshifting an aluminum pile of
And we'll
automobile and
pee on
send you up there.
And we will
pee on
before we
it
send
and
you
do
up.
all the things.
It's
Wow.
knocking at my door.
What a way of entering us into this episode. Listeners are like, this is the wrong show. I need to just exit the premises, AirPods out of the ears. Hello, everyone. Are listening or watching an episode of The Cup. Yes, I'm Jill. I'm doing great, Mac. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. What is your ensemble today? What is in your cup?
Yes, my ensemble today, I am wearing, I guess I'll kind of spoil what we're reviewing when I say what I'm wearing too, right?
Yes, you can do that.
So I guess if people are watching, you see Space Dogs the musical. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So I have on this shirt with a little astronaut. So this is actually, I was a Frosh leader. I went to University of Toronto for theater, Mississauga campus, and Space Jam was the theme that year. So
Nice.
all of our like Frosh leader shirts for every day was different. And this one has a little astronaut on it. So I thought apropos. And then I got my little like velvety cardigan that's kind of giving me spacesuit vibes, maybe kind of. And then I have little electric guitar earrings on.
Perfect.
Because boom, Space Dogs of the Cosmodrome. Okay, sorry. The soundtrack has been in my head for weeks. I did. And then I'm drinking hot chocolate today, which I don't know if I've ever had on the cup. So I thought that was cool and whimsical. Drinking it out of a cup.
Very nice.
That's me. Very silly today. So I'm excited to let that spew out. Yeah.
And of course, joining us again is our wonderful guest, a man who is not wearing yellow tights cross-gartered and is not in Illyria this week. It is the wonderful Dewey. Hello, Dewey.
Hey guys, what's up?
Welcome back, good sir. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, tell us, how are you? What's in your cup today? Do you have a special ensemble on?
Well, I will say I am scraping to the bottom of my booster juice right now, which was very good.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had a ripped berry with a warrior booster.
Hashtag not sponsored.
That's right. Hashtag not sponsored. Sorry. And today I'm wearing my Spartan gray t-shirt because I need to be comfortable, and I'm also in my track pants right now because I just got done 2 days of horse riding at Medieval Times, and I haven't ridden in over a month and a half, and my legs really hurt. So I'm just getting comfortable and chilling out.
Yes.
We love it.
Fantabulous. And of course, we have our wonderful co-artistic producer, Ryan Borochovitz. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Mac. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're off to a great start here.
We are.
You started in your Russian accent, really tempted me to just respond to you and like ruff, 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 and speak the whole thing in dog, but no, it was too silly, and yet I still felt the need to tell you that I intended to be silly.
I approve of this message.
Speaking of dogs and ensembles, I have brought out my classic Dachshund shirt with tiny little hot dog dogs on it.
Hey. Look at you.
It felt appropriate. It's the most canine thing I own. And in my cup, Jill made hot chocolate sound really good, so I too made up some hot chocolate, and I have it in my... I'm not going to bother reading it, it's the whole thing, but it's a quote by Leo Tolstoy on this mug that was gifted to me by
Very
my parents.
appropriate.
Yes, I have mentioned before, Tolstoy is one of my favorite authors, so in the Russian theme of this all, even though he died before the Russian Revolution and therefore knew nothing of the Soviets, it just, again, this is the most dog-like thing I own, this is the most Russian thing I own, I suppose, so it seemed fitting.
Approved. And I am currently drinking a tea from the cup as well. So, there we go. No vodka.
Nice.
There we go. All right. So, as we may have hinted at, we are doing a very fun show from the Broadway HD catalog today. One we haven't touched in a while. So, it's nice to be back in the canon of Broadway HD. And to kick that off, we are doing a off-Broadway musical. And the musical in question is a canine musical. And it is called Space Dogs, set all around the space race that kind of took over the 50s and 60s, but mainly from the point of view of the Russian dogs that were being tested on as they tried to get Sputnik and other cosmic programs into the air. So it's kind of a historical retelling of this tale from kind of a Flight of the Conchords style of performance. Very good. It was directed by Ellie Heyman. It was recorded in 2022 and written by Van Hughes and Nick Blaemire. And they also star in it too. So it's written and starring. It's a very cool thing. And with any musical, we always got to start off with our traditional question. And Jill, since you are our resident musicale gal, what is your favorite song of the production?
I love that, musicale gal. Yeah, so as you saw in my introduction, I've had pretty much the entire soundtrack in and out of my head since Ryan and I watched this a couple weeks back. But one that is prominently in my head, beat-wise, lyric-wise, and meaning-wise, would definitely have to be Werner von Braun.
Damn it, that's mine too!
I feel like it's a lot of everyone's because...
Too, but
so let me unpack it a little, and I'll try not to steal everybody else's answers, but okay. I think that song is perfect because I also think if anyone were to just listen to that song and nothing else, it's like the heartbeat or like the thesis of the piece. I think it just does, like the song itself, but also the performance of the song just picks at exactly like how farcical and like ridiculous the misogyny and pompousness that went around the space race. And like in particular, like it's so on the nose, it's so blunt. Like one of the first lyrics is, after World War II, we hired a Nazi, we hired a Nazi, we hired, like, and it's like, Russia's not the only one with secrets. Like, it's like basically saying, hey, America, like you were doing some shady stuff as well. Let's at least bring you up, level the scales a little bit here. And I just think the beat is so good. It's on my workout playlist now because it's such a good beat. Nick Blaemire dons Werner von Braun in the actual piece. It's really lovely. We'll get into it, but both the guys kind of in a Brechtian way put on characters, take off characters. And I thought his embrace of kind of the German scientist who was hired by America to like do all this backdoor space race stuff too. And his outfit was like this leather jacket and goggles. It kind of reminded me, I don't know if anyone has seen Atlantis, but that one character, the name's escaping me, but he's the one that like drills into the walls of Atlantis. Like looks exactly
Vinny.
like him.
It's Vinny.
Somebody remembers that movie.
That's it. But anyways, I'm sorry, but in the actual recording, it's auto-tuned, but in the show itself, Nick does this riff on history that is just like chef's kiss vocally. First of all, both Van and Nick's vocal abilities, absolutely astonishing and insane. Honestly, any of these songs I think could get a shout out just because of how pristine their voices are. But he does like this riff on like, hey, history. Like I can't even redo it. It's so good. Yeah, so that definitely gets my shout out. But Space Dogs of the Cosmodrome, the theme song, is getting like an honorable mention because we're recording this in January. Everyone knows at least Canadian Januaries can be a dumpy month. And there's days when I just like, Ryan can attest to this, walk around our apartment just singing Space Dogs of the Cosmodrome to like get me through some droney days, if you will. So Werner von Braun gets my first choice. Theme song, Space Dogs of the Cosmodrome, honorable mention.
Very good. Well, I'll say mine was also Werner von Braun. Mainly for the main reasons Jill gave, because it's a great, catchy tune, and it definitely highlights the hypocrisy of history, where, you know, like whoever writes your history book is going to classify them in a very positive light. And I mean, Werner von Braun, I know when I was taught the Cold War history, was kind of given the, he was a Nazi, but you know, he came over, he did a lot of good things. got us to the moon, Great guy. I mean, the Russians killed their scientist, overworked him to death. But hey, our guy, he was great. So, it's like one of those things where it's like, he's still a Nazi. And I mean, Truman made that order saying, we will never hire a Nazi. But then they hired a whole bunch of Nazi scientists. So, it's like one of those great things of this whole piece is history is all about perspective. And it's all about how you're viewing these historical moments, whether it's from the dog's perspective or from Khrushchev's perspective or from the creator's perspective or chief designer. Sorry, he's chief designer. Or even like LBJ. Because not everybody knows LBJ was like leading the space race for a bit there before he became vice president. So it's one of those great looks of the darker, twisted elements of history that under different lights can really not look as nice. And the fact they make Werner von Braun like this doctor, like Doc Ock looking guy with the leather gloves. And it's like, I've never seen Werner von Braun portrayed. It's like an evil German scientist. But it's like, no, I mean, he was a Nazi. Like the Americans got him when they liberated Germany. Like he wasn't like, off in the meadow, like picking flowers and like doing happy experiments somewhere. Like he was off doing shit, and then they picked him up and brought him back to the U.S. I mean, heck, Indiana Jones 5 is doing a whole spin on this concept. So, it's like something that like people are now kind of taking notice of. In fact, we have a whole musical that is about historical perspectives being altered and kind of the weird and wacky parts of history that kind of get sanded down, glossed over, polished up for the sake of, better storytelling is really interesting. So, Werner von Braun for me. That was mine. Ryan?
Yeah, like I knew Jill was going to take it and I allowed her to go first on this. But yes, Werner von Braun does get a big shout out from me. I don't need to retread all the great reasons both of you have made. The one thing I'll add is I just love the laser sound effects throughout it. It is the most sci-fi song in this very sci-fi show. And it's just so stupid. Like so much of this is in the best possible way, and it just makes me smile. And yes, of course, the on-the-noseness of after World War II, we hired a Nazi. We say it over and over again just to make sure you heard it in the back. But I came ready with a backup, and I will talk about Between Two Great Oceans, I believe is the title of it, which is another kind of USA, but also Boo USA song. But yes, I just love the very like country roads feel vibe that this song has. It sounds like
you're in Florida, man. You're like down in the bayou.
It has the perfect balance of sounding like a patriotic anthem, but then if you really listen to what the lyrics are saying, it is the biggest FU to this whole American exceptionalism idea of its own self-superiority. And yeah, it's in a show that is a lot about, shady things that the Russians did in their space program. It's very, I think, important that it does jostle between the two and show that, the Americans, in addition to hiring Nazis, were completely out of their depths and did silly things, and this whole space race was the result of these two pompous world powers just being stupid at each other, and this song crystallizes that perfectly.
Yes. It was just a bunch of dick measuring. And that's what it all boils down to. And a big miscommunication.
And Lyndon Johnson knew a thing or two about dick measuring, if you ever heard about the way he talked to his aides.
That is true. Historical reference, Ryan. I appreciate that.
Yes.
As someone who's been to the LBJ Presidential Library, they do make reference to some of his more crude elements. I mean, heck, even Seinfeld
mural of his dick on the wall at the library. No, there is
I mean, it is very patriotic in there, let me tell you. There's some big statues in there. And I mean, like, heck, even Seinfeld made a reference to LBJ and its crudeness when it came to kind of dick measuring and flaunting things to prove a point. And Joe's like, what are they talking about?
I love this episode. It's a wonky one and I'm here for it.
Yes. Wonderful. Dewey, though, like, what's your favorite song?
Well, I gotta be honest here. That was also a great song. Before I even say any of the other songs, though, I have to say, like, Canada's crazy too, but let me tell you, there is nothing that I love more than when Americans laugh at Americans. It is so good, which is why I love all of this musical, because I love the going back and forth between look at us, what we did, and also look at what we did. Is fantastic. But you know what? Werner von Braun I loved, but it actually wasn't even the top of my list. Honestly, opening number, Space Dogs of the Cosmodrome, is fantastic. That was the song that I've been singing all week,
Yep.
And I watched this on a Monday morning with some friends in the living room, and it was the only time I really had to watch it. So I was like, okay, like, I really hope I enjoy this. And when they blasted that song, I was like, what a lovely morning this is.
I'm in.
This is perfect. Like, what a great day. So I love that one. And then the other one that's in my head is the history of dogs. Because of course the dogs, that one, like that plays in my head all the time too. So just on its catchiness, those are my two big songs. But Ron Braun, come on, that song slaps.
Yeah, nice.
I love it. All right. Well, in that case, let's get into the next question, which is, what do we think of Van and Nick's performances? As they're the only two performers who are leading this piece. It's a two-hander. Ryan, I will let you go first on this one.
Yeah, like they're great. They are so fun. They are magnetic, incredibly talented, like musically, comedically, all the voices and impressions they do, the puppetry. Like, we're going to talk about a lot of these elements in more detail as we go on. But the fact that they wrote this piece and it is entirely done by the two of them, it has, as I would call it, big fringe show energy, I suppose we could say, in terms of this is clearly this passion project between these two guys that they're, have so much fun writing and then clearly are having so much fun performing, and it's just infectious. There's the improv sequence in the middle where they're like, okay, we have a moment of downtime here, so we'll just open it up to the audience. Does anyone know a space race fact? And like they say in that moment, like, we're obviously obsessed with this stuff, but who else has anything? And I believe that they made this show out of so much love, and it shines in their performance and the way that they can just jump between like character to character, playing all the musical instruments, singing all the songs, operating the puppets, operating the tech, the green screens, everything. It is just masterful performance that is like, they deserve all of the awards for this. And I don't know if this was nominated for, like, I guess the Obies because it was Off-Broadway, but they deserve them all. I don't even know what they might have been up against.
Ryan, question. Do you think that audience member who shouted out the fun fact, do you think they were a plant?
I thought about this myself, actually, because the duck and cover response was so quick.
It was so perfect. Yeah.
But it was, and I would maybe, not to be cynical about audience plants and improv, I would say maybe just because they knew they were recording this particular performance, they put in a good one. But I would like to think that part of the show is improv based on audience response every night, but I could be wrong about both parts of that speculation.
Fair enough. Dewey?
Yeah, I thought they were actually incredible, both of them, because comedically, musically, like, they were also picking up instruments at different times and doing their thing on top of being puppets. And yeah, just, you can tell this one came straight from their weird little heads, and I thank them so much for that. As far as having that little improv scene with when they went under the desks or whatever, and they said that, like, I think Ryan said, like, that they were so quick and ready with that one. I think it was a plan. I think it was probably, I have two theories on what it was. It was either a plan and they're just like, hey, we're filming this, like, let's just make sure we got this one. Or, I know this is what a little industry secret here. This is what used to happen with one game that they used to do at Second City. When I used to work there was this game that you would have where, like, they'd make a joke saying sex with me is like a object, and they'd be like this, shout out things, and whenever we hear, we'll say our joke. And the amount of times that people would say wrench or tire or something like that, basically the cast would have their answers locked and loaded if somebody said that. So they would just choose that one and they would plan on that. So I wonder if
well-known fact about the hiding under the desk. So maybe they
yeah. So maybe they probably had it a few times, and they were like, "Oh, we got the desk one, beautiful." And then
yeah. Dewey, are you allowed to have just spoiled Second City's greatest secret on this open forum?
They're under new management. That don't work there anymore.
Cool.
Love
it.
I mean, Nick and Van, if you're watching this, please go down in the comments. Let us know.
And tell us if your improv was sincere.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, we loved your show.
Yeah, either way, it was also
Obsessed.
great, by the way.
Yes. Wonderful. Jill, what do you think of Nick and Van?
I was starstruck. It was the first song, like, totally, I'm here for it. I looked at Ryan, we watched it together, and I was like, I'm going to love this show. This is going to be awesome. And then it was after, like, the second song, I was like, these people are, this is my swear word, fucking amazing. Like, I was like, the talent out of these two and the chemistry and their voices blend perfectly. And it's just, so I ended up looking them up, and, like, apologies, Nick and Van, because you're both very, very well-established, vetted Broadway performers. currently right now, like Van is on Broadway in Almost Famous. Currently, he's been a part of American Idiot, on Broadway opposite to Billy Joe Armstrong, and the tour. He's been in Spring Awakening, and I knew that. I literally said to Ryan too, I was like, I bet you Van has at least been in Spring Awakening and or American Idiot because of the quality of his voice. And what do you know? It's like one of his top credits. And Nick too has been in like Falsettos, Crybaby. I just have their pages up right now too. Altar Boys, SpongeBob the Musical, Tick Tick Boom. He was John in Tick Tick Boom off Broadway. So like, just, I love that there are these well-established actors, musicians, and then they're just like, yeah, we want to do this project. We're passionate about it. And so just like knowing their kind of grandiose credits, but then still having the passion and the time and the absolute brilliance to do a piece like this is so cool. Like, I think it's a great testament to like, even as big or as far as you make it or go, like you can absolutely do the little black box kind of fringe-esque vibes. And in my opinion, they're probably going to be one of the best things people are ever going to see you do because you're like that much more passionate about doing it. And just to talk to, the meticulousness of moving of set and moving between the sort of different genres, if you will, right, of that they have going on through the puppetry, through the green screen, through just like concert kind of style. It was flawless. Like, I would love to be a fly on the room during the table work process of this. Like, was there a blueprint, or this is getting really specific, but to the point where like Van would start playing the keyboard, and then in order for the next switch to happen, like Nick would come with the puppet Leica in between them. They would like pass the puppet off via like shoulders or whatever, and then Nick would continue right away to play. Or it just was like so fluid. We'll get into that more too. I just think they're fantastic.
So Jill, when you were listing their credits, are you saying they have the pedigree for this?
It's
going to be a lot of dog puns throughout this, as there should be.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm gonna denote everything people have said already. But I mean, Nick and Van and Nick, you are both superb performers. I would love to see a anthology series where you two just choose different moments in history, like the French Revolution. I don't know, like the election of Obama. Like, you can choose a whole bunch of like just fun anthology moments in history, and then just make historical shows around them that tell these stories from the different, like a different perspective. Like, I don't know, French Revolution, do it from like the guillotine's perspective. I don't know, like choose something fun where you can just like have a blast with that. Because I mean, you chose to do a show about the space race, but from Leica the dog's perspective as the main kind of viewpoint. It's like the creativity of your brains is incredible, and the work and just the way you use all these different aspects of theater to make the story just so much grander and wild, and just capturing that zany energy of this historical moment really shows your understanding of how to use all the facets of theater to make a piece pop. And so, bravo. I mean, doing a two-hander is one of the hardest things to do, because you have to be so in sync with your partner, and you have to have the right pace with each other, that you're feeding one another and you're almost literally speaking on top of each other. Like, you have to be so in tune. And the fact that you two are literally like sometimes not even on the same part of the stage, and you're already moving with each other. It's just the choreography of this piece alone is incredible. Like, just bravo to both of you. Bravo. So, whew. All right. Next question though, and Dewey, we'll let you start this one, which is, what was your favorite production or design element of this show? Because there's a lot to choose from.
There's tons. Like, I mean, the actual stage design is incredible with all the different LED panels and whatnot. But I did love, because I know obviously a lot of the show is between the two of them, but this is also a merriment of their actual production crew as well. But I love the projection that they had when they had the overhead camera all of a sudden come down. And that, I forget which song it was, but then after they projected on the back of the wall, or anytime they'd use a green screen and they would be projecting it somewhere else. And I'm just like, the ideas of that and effectively using that on a set, because I do find those are things that can actually get a little gimmicky at points. And maybe it's just because of the medium of the show being the silly fun that it is, but I don't know. I thought they worked perfectly. I'm like, yeah, because it's not a big stage. It's not a big space, and they use it so well. Like there was nothing taken for granted in the entire production. I felt.
Yep.
Wonderful. Jill, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, standing by what Dewey's saying, every single element married each other beautifully, complemented each other. Nothing was like overdone. And if it was, there was a reason why it was overdone or like flashy per se. It just kind of added to the satire of the songs and the piece. But I think I want to shout out, I actually kind of struggled with pinpointing exactly but I think I want to shout out the puppets and the puppetry. And I think why I'm going there right now is we've just mentioned how there's parts where Nick and Van are on opposite sides of the stage, but yet they're still so in sync. And speaking about that through the lens of puppetry, there's actually a moment where Nick is the voice of Laika, but Van is operating him, the dog, like operating her. I was thinking of Nick's voice at the moment. Operating Laika, operating her, Van is doing it, but Nick is voicing her as he's doing other stuff. And like the way that the mannerisms that Van was doing while listening to someone else's vocal intonations for that puppet was amazing. And then even when we scope into the dogs having a conversation, I just think every single dog had such a distinct character, and them in their little bunk beds. When they did like the doggy beauty pageant, there we go. Sorry, the name escaped me. You just got a little bit of their flair as well. And then like, I guess along with the puppetry too, the use of props like when the dogs were kind of like put into the space unit, like it seems on paper like another added element to what Nick and Van are doing, but like no, it is like a whole other character and way of needing to shift your brain in space. And so I just want to honor that I thought that the puppetry was brilliant in this and subtle, which is neat.
Brilliant. Ryan?
Yeah, like it's so hard to pick a favorite element in this because it is truly a total work of art, what they've created here, a Gesamtkunstwerk, if you will. There's your Wagner reference for this episode. But yeah, everything is so perfectly in sync with each other. Like part of me wanted to say, oh, I don't know, the music, but that feels like a cheat when we've already had a question devoted to favorite songs. But yeah, I want to maybe second what Jill's saying about the puppetry and the props in general, just because there's like a lot of space junk all over the stage. It feels like what you always hear about the making of the original Star Trek, where it's just, okay, what kind of sci-fi looking things can we find in prop storage, or things that we could, like household appliances that we can make look sci-fi by just having like glowing lights attached to them. And regardless of how they came to making the various things we see in the set or in the props, I think it has that like 60s sci-fi feel to it of just, yeah, this looks spacey. What does it do? Who knows? And yeah, and I will also second the puppetry because, yeah, they're so well designed, the consistent look that all of these dogs have, the way their mouths don't move, yet they're still so very expressive. And you can see, they're operators because Nick and Van take turns like operating different dogs, and Nick in particular operating like throughout the show, but just imbuing so much humanity or doganity into these like funny, motionless puppets. And also, I know this isn't a shout out for the puppetry itself, but I loved the opening of the show where they're just throwing the dogs into the audience. Yeah. And I remember Jill and I turned to each other like, wow, this show must be so expensive if they have to go through a whole pile of dogs that they throw into the audience every single night, but then they bring out the big butterfly nets and say, we need the dogs back, give them back. And it's just, I'm going to be chef kissing a lot throughout this show, but we got it. There's just so much great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. And I'll say for me, I enjoyed their storytelling. Like, if you are a history buff like me, then you know, like I knew about Sputnik 1, Sputnik 2, like a lot of the stuff there, the basics of the space race. I understood that. I haven't done like deep dive research into the ins and outs of all this. But that being said, I love the fact that they took the broader storylines of the space race, but then interwove that with the wacky, less known elements of the space race, and told this really compelling story that people who know or feel they know the majority of what happened during the space race. People who know nothing about the space race can all come together and really get invested in the story about the US and the USSR and how they really showcase both sides being dick-waving countries that were kind of like, they're just being guys trying to, outmatch each other. And it's like, seriously, dudes, like, didn't have to be this way. Like, didn't have to kill all those dogs and bears and monkeys and everything else they did to get to their goal. But it's just this really great way of combining all these different elements of the story and making it into one fluid piece without it seeming either like a historical documentary or, on the other hand, like kind of just a mishmash of fun facts being woven together. Like, there's still very much a strong through line of the chief designer and Laika's relationship mixed in with, and over in the US, we have LBJ trying to catch up. Yeah, I love that. I mean,
So
LBJ,
good.
I'm currently in the process of reading a 3-volume history of LBJ. And he is a fascinating historical figure when you realize all the shit he got up to. Like, he was a very smart politician, powerful figure. And it's like, damn, you do not get enough attention for what you got up to in your time, Mr. LBJ. You're very fascinating. So yeah, just the fact we get they didn't have to include the Americans in the story. They could have just stayed focused on Laika and the chief designer and just focused on that. But the fact they were very smart and went, no, this is a U.S. audience. We got to kind of keep in mind what was going on over here. So then you see how the two of them played off one another, like the fact that the Russians intercept LBJ's communique, not understanding English perfectly, misinterpret it, which then leads to the creation of Sputnik 1, which then really terrified the US, which then in turn inspired them to step it up. Like, it's like they really create a really compelling story that everybody would get into. It didn't have to be someone who knew nothing about history. It didn't have to be someone who knew all of the history. It's like everybody can walk away going, what a compelling story that I didn't know fully. So it's like, I knew what happened to Laika in the end, or at least I thought it. I was like, doesn't the dog come back? And then sure enough, at the end they confirmed. I'm like, oh damn,
She never got her steak.
he never got her
Stop.
steak. We will get into that actually, because we have the next question, which
Mhm.
is, what was the weakest aspect of the production? I would like to start this one
Yeah.
because I want to hear what you guys think about this. So, as we just alluded to, this story ends with the death of the chief designer in ambiguity. Like, nobody knew who he was until 10 years later. The dog dies in space. Like, not the happiest of endings. I mean, heck, even Les Mis gets a better happy reconciliation ending than this show. But that being said, there were a lot of darker elements throughout this piece that at times, because of the really great energy that Nick and Van were bringing, and they were very kind of light energy, like, there were moments that could have been darker, and I think that would have helped the show sink in a bit more, if I'm making sense. Like, the fact that they killed monkeys, they killed dogs, they killed bears, the chief designer ends up in the gulag for a number of years. And yet they're kind of like, I don't want to say pepping, but like, the energy they're bringing kind of moves you through that history rather quickly without giving you that chance to go, whoa, wait a minute. This guy was innocently thrown into a gulag for 10 years, or however, 5 to 10 years, which are horrible places. Like, a lot of people, like they say, like, millions of people died in these gulags, but we're kind of rushing through that really quickly. Or then it's like, yeah, we killed a bunch of animals, but Laika was the one that went up to space. And then it's not till the very end you get that kind of really dark turn and go, oh my God, the cost of what this race cost these two people. So for me, I would have loved a bit more of breath in the show. Like, the show's only like an hour and 20 minutes. I would have loved maybe like a few more seconds, a few more minutes of just some of those darker moments. Let that sink in so you really get the cost and the darkness throughout the piece. Because it's like, yeah, it's light, it's funny, but then we're also doing some really dark shit without, and giving that its proper due. There were times where I felt we're brushing through some really dark shit here, and we're missing kind of the darker elements of what this story entails. And then when we do the 180 at the end and really get into the dark ending, it's like, whoa, I get a bit of whiplash there at the end. So for me, I'm like, it was really good, but some of the darker elements of the story I feel could have had a bit more time to sit and gestate with the audience before we jump to the next thing.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Yeah. Ryan
Sorry.
or
Oh,
Joe,
yeah.
one of you. Well, you both seem ready to talk.
I just think, sorry, Ryan,
Okay.
mine's really tiny, but like, I hear what you're saying, Mac, and I
Yeah.
think that would also pack like more of a punch to what we saw. I'm just wondering too, if like part of that feeling of like, wait, we didn't get a chance to be in remorse, or wait, what are we doing? I think that's also could be played as like a cheeky, almost like, mechanism of that just was glazed over. Like, right. It was like the only progress, like the only thing was progress. And the quickest way we get there without any limitations, we have to do it. It's like, we're so goal oriented on this winning this space race. We don't care how fast or how many lives are lost kind of thing. So like, I feel from an artistic point of view, I'm totally behind you, Mac, of like those moments of when you're watching as the audience member, just watching this piece, wanting to feel those sort of meditative moments of being like thrown into the depths and then pepped back up, because that would be a nice little jostling kind of in the moment vibe. But again, on the other foot, I kind of like that plot wise.
Yeah.
It's like a dramaturgical choice, even almost, to just wave us through those things, because that's exactly what was going on in those scientists' minds as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Brian?
Yeah, like
Ryan?
like Jill, you kind of picked up on some of the things I was going to say too, because like I hear you, Mac, and I think maybe it's interesting because I see a deliberate effort being made to prevent that darkness from seeping in until the end. And I like the gulag, for example. Yeah, you're right. That's a horrible place to be. And the show acknowledges that in that shot that Dewey, you were talking about, of the overhead of being in the.
Yeah.
And then the next thing we get after that is Nick saying, "Hey, Van, shouldn't we get back to the dogs? That's what the people are here for." And then they do the fun history of the dogs song. So I see this as, it's not that this is an oversight on their part. They are very deliberately being like, don't get swept up by the darkness. It's coming later. But we need to have fun for that to hit so hard at the end. And like, I think like to Jill's point about, the momentum of the space race itself didn't give time to sit in the darkness and grieve and mourn.
It's kind of nice too. Like, it's almost like, this is going to sound a bit like far out, dude, but like, we don't, as the audience, you're not really in the full darkness until you find out that Laika is forever, right? Like, until Laika is in space, in the abyss, in the dark. That at least is when I felt like, whoa, like I actually started getting teary, because it was like the classic thing of like, oh, this is such a cool rock concert and I'm learning historical facts and there's puppetry and look at all this theater magic happening. And then it was like, the actual stage got dark. The lull of the music got dark. We find out that one of our protagonists has been left in the dark by someone that they thought they trust, and now is literally perpetually in dark abyss forever. And you're like, whoa, right?
And like the other kind of thought that I had in response to what you're saying, Mac, is there's different kinds of like dramatic irony, I suppose.
True.
And there's, I think the scholar's name was D.C. Muick, talks about what they, it's an initial name, so I'm not sure, call a general dramatic irony, which is a form of dramatic irony that's not set up by the show of the audience is given information and then they can laugh or be amused at how another character wasn't privy to that information, but it's things we know from real history create a sense of dramatic irony without needing to be told that. You watch a play about the Napoleonic Wars, you know Napoleon's going to lose. You don't need them to plant the seed of that. So if you're watching characters in the French army, their fate is already sealed, and you can kind of bring that with you. And I would say, knowing what happens to Laika, sorry, they make that joke in the show a few times that people often mispronounce this name, Laika. Yeah, I know that Laika doesn't make it. So me watching it, seeing these sweet moments of when you come back, I'll give you steak. I'm like, oh, I felt the darkness even before that. Even if the show was doing everything in its power to push that away, it seeps in for those who are familiar with it, and it gets to be a bigger gut punch for the people who aren't familiar with it. So I definitely hear the point you're making, and I think there's a valid argument to be made there, but I don't know if I personally agree.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very tight show, so it's like, that's like a nitpick of, like, I don't know, like maybe put a ticker on the stage of like, dog's dead, like dog's alive, like I don't know, something. Anyway, but it's like it's such a tight show that like you'd have to do some reworking. But like the show's perfect as it is. It's just one of those things where it's like the bit of whiplash I got, because even I knew, like I was like 90% sure. I'm like, I'm pretty sure Leica doesn't make it back. And then when I was like, yeah, okay, confirmed, Leica does not come home for the steak. I was like, and it is so tragic. I mean, it is a tragic story. And I was just like, give me a few more moments of breath there, because we're moving so fast. But I also get what Jill's saying, where that's the point, is we move so fast because the world was moving so fast that nobody ever stopped to think of what are the ramifications. So it's a nitpick. It's a nitpick.
And I would even add to that, like not stopping to think of the ramifications. The chief designer says so often, especially in the early songs, that we need to start a race to prevent a war, that this is seen as we have nuclear weapons now. A third world war will be the end of the world. So if we can do this proxy war fought by scientists as opposed to being fought by soldiers, we can... It's unfortunate that animals will have to die, but it is for the greater good of humanity. And the tragicness of that is he does that, and he does prevent the war from happening, but at the cost of his best friend. Yeah.
True. Dewey, what's your weakest element? Because we haven't heard anything from
you. Or you can pipe into this debate if it has nothing to do with it.
I mean, it all kind of goes in with this debate, to be honest, because I agree with what Ryan and Jill are kind of saying, is like, it's kind of perfect for it, because at least with US, I find I don't, to be honest, know much about Russia, but when things suck, who cares? It's another bright day tomorrow, so let's just keep going on, and we don't need to worry about the bad stuff. So I kind of see it as like that kind of a vibe, as in like, yeah, there's negative stuff and there's really dark shit within this story, but we know you're here for the dogs, we know you're here for the musical numbers, so let's just keep trudging on. But at the same time, I remember when I was actually first watching it, I was just kind of like, wow, this is just like an hour and a half of just fucking kick-ass, sorry, that's my swear, rock and roll awesomeness. And then when the tragic, heavy moment actually came, I was like, oh. I almost forgot that we even had to have a moment like this. Or that, that like, oh, I think you must have thrown this in just because you knew you had to have one somewhere. Like it didn't even feel like an actual thought. It was more like, oh, we need this in here at some point just to bring this home. And then went back to being all up in energy and fun and awesome. So yeah, I see both sides to it really. But I would agree, like the first time I watched it, it kind of took me off guard. I'm like, oh, okay, we're going here. Because same thing. I was just like, pretty sure they don't come back. I'm pretty sure she's up there. But yeah, so it didn't hit me as hard either when they kind of went into it. I was just kind of like, yeah, I know. But yeah, still obviously terrible and insane.
Yeah. I remember I looked up just like definitely not a fun fact. A fact. Leica was, I think I'm paraphrasing this, but like was only up there, like pretty much only last about 5 hours, because then died of overheated exhaustion. So like even, like it.
Oh, yeah, we always hear stories about dogs trapped in cars for too long on hot days. Like imagine being trapped in a space probe.
Yeah, so it wasn't like, oh, she was left up there and lasted a couple days without food or water. No, it was pretty instant, which is
R.I.P. Leica.
Yeah,
R.I.P. Leica.
The other thing too that I thought about me is if I was ever chosen to go to space, I'm just going to accept sweet death right now, because I can barely get on a plane, let alone being shot out of our atmosphere. And I think the heart is alone, especially as a dog who has no one else there and is probably just very scared out of its mind. Like, I wouldn't even expected Leica to get to space. So, obviously not by Leica's choice, but kudos to Leica for at least doing that. Because holy shit, I'd be going.
I'm just thinking, Dewey, going back to like when we did a show in Gravenhurst last summer, like we went to like this watering hole thing, and like the amount of buildup that we were like, of you jumping off this like medium-sized cliff into the water hole. You did it though. You did it. But there's a lot of fear behind those eyes.
I did the smaller one because there was another one that everybody's going off of, and I'm like, wait, so we don't 100% know how shallow that is? And we're like, no. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like,
to be fair, I did the smaller one too. We were smart. about it.
Yeah, we were smart. Plus, I don't know, anything where I can like go back. There was also a lot of rocks around. And, like anything where my noggin is not, protected, I ain't doing that shit.
Love it.
All right, that was a second swear. I apologize.
Yeah, all good, all good. Jill and Ryan, you guys, what was your weakest aspects? Do you have one of your own?
I could go. I struggle to think of one, so the one I'm gonna say just feels like, why even bother? But I'll say it. I will preface it by saying I love the music in this piece, and I have been listening to the album a lot since watching it, and yeah, they're all bops, every single one of them. I didn't instantly find them to be catchy, oddly enough. Like, watching them, I'm like, yeah, these songs are so great, I'm going to be humming these forever. And then the next day, I was struggling to recall how any of them went, which was strange. And then I started listening to the album, and then they came back to me. I'm like, oh yeah, and now they're all in there forever. But I found, as lovable as the songs were, they had a bit of a, is forgetfulness the right word? Or they didn't stick like as much as I hoped to. This show is this kind of just beautiful, fleeting thing, but then you leave it and you feel pumped by it. But until I started re-listening to the songs, I didn't really find like they got inside of me. And that feels like a silly critique, and maybe others disagree, and you definitely found them very memorable and their own with that. But if I have to struggle to think of a weakest element, that is something that came to my mind about it.
Interesting. Jill?
I think I would just, to pick up, I would agree with you, Ryan. I think like Space Dogs at the Cosmodrome, like Dewey said too, it stuck with him. I cannot get that song out of my head. I think that is like a brilliant theme song. Like, good on them.
It is. And I'm not diminishing the brilliance of any of the songs.
No. But I think aside from that, and then like Werner von Braun was the one personally, like I couldn't tell you like off the top of my head, a name of the song, another song from the musical and what it sounded like right now. I know like if someone were to play it, I'd be like, oh yeah, that happened here. And this is what we were talking about and what was going on stage. But I think I would agree with you, Ryan, that like a lot of the numbers were such like power ballads or like power numbers in situation. But then coming out of it, I wasn't like, oh yeah, that song. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, like you're saying too, I think, right? But anyways, that's just me kind of answering you and segueing to my weakest aspect of the production, which is so silly. I don't think we've ever said this, but I wish the run for them was longer. That's where I'm going to say the weakest aspect of this premiere production is that it should have gone on longer, because it's pretty sure
it's been extended.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there we
nothing
go. Wrong with it.
Amazing. Is it going to be Van and Nick in the spots? Do we know that? I feel like a dunce for saying so. Because originally it only was up until March. It had like almost like a month and a half run, I think, from what I can find.
Here.
Because I think, and this is going to take us
extended you to March 20.
Oh no, but that was of 2022.
Oh, my apologies.
So it's okay. So also Brian and I did a deep dive in this. So this was 2022, and it ran until March 2022. Because I guess it explains now how I just said, like, Van is in Almost Famous on Broadway. So that's why I asked. I was like, oh, neat. Are they extending it and maybe possibly using different actors, which that might be a totally different space race, if you will.
A different animal.
Yeah, there we go. Bow wow. Yeah, I just think it should have gone on longer. And again, this is probably like the space wasn't available and or contracts were switching and changing. The space,
Yeah.
I didn't even realize I made that pun. But yeah, because this is kind of getting into the next question, so I'm not going to go too far into it. But I think this is a piece a lot of people should see. So anybody listening to this, get your hands on the Broadway HD, like at least digitized version of seeing it. I wish I saw it in person as well, which again we'll get into down the line. But yeah, I just think it's masterful from an art point of view, and then also a historical point of view, a satirical point of view, all the ickle points of views. This piece has got it going on, and I wish it was on the stage longer.
That's fair. All right. Next question is, would you recommend this production to others? Ryan, as our resident TA, soon to be Doctor of Theater, would you put this on a syllabus for a class?
I would, I will say, but it has to be the right class for it, because
what would be the right class, do you think?
Maybe something like historical drama maybe would be a good place for it, and that is something that I somewhat specialize in and would be interested in teaching a class in one day. I think the way it represents history, which we'll get more into in a later question, is neat for a lot of reasons, and it could be good. Maybe something like Intro to Postmodernism. This would be like a good fit in that. Not that I'm the kind of person who would ever teach a course on like history of the musical, but this might be a fun capstone for a course like that. You cover all the hits and classics and then just end with, here's a weird little thing I found on Broadway HD. But
Love it.
Yeah, it would. Okay, so actually fun thing in a pedagogical context here. Every time I start a new semester as a TA, I get my students to introduce themselves with your name, your pronouns, what program and your study you're in, and tell me one piece of media that is currently occupying your thoughts. Not your favorite, not your all-time favorite or even current favorite. It doesn't even have to be one you like, just what is something that you've encountered recently and just can't stop thinking about. And I always break the ice by doing one of myself, and I had just watched this prior to this semester beginning, so I told my students the piece of media that is occupying my thoughts right now is Space Dogs the Musical. And so, to answer the, I guess, essence of this question, not so much would I program this in a course, but would I recommend it to people? I literally began this semester of theater history 2 by recommending this to all of my students. And yeah, I stand by that. This piece is amazing, in case you couldn't tell from my enthusiasm in every question here. The fact that the one weak thing I struggled to name is that, maybe some of the songs could have been more memorable, but then I instantly listen to them on repeat and now find them very memorable. The fact that I wanted to do that, even if I initially didn't find them to be particularly memorable, this is amazing. The talent on display is staggering. I would want everybody to watch this, even if they don't love it or like it, just to encounter this work, see how it makes you feel. Because it's just a good time. Don't we all kind of need that from time to time?
Yes.
It's true. It's true. It's true. Jill, what do you think?
Yeah, picking up everything that Ryan is putting down, 1000% recommend this production to others. And I want to kind of like just to bring up here too, this, so the four of us on this panel right now, we saw this by watching the digitized filmed pro shot on Broadway HD. And so we've talked about this on other panels, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is I think this is different, and I'll unpack it. We had the sort of advantage, if you will, of following the piece, following the story in like a zoomed in way, because we're watching it through like a film screen, right? We're watching it like it's a movie because the pro shot is capturing the best moments or the important moments or yeah. So even though we saw a lot of the movement of props and the segue from scene to scene, we still had quite a tailored view, like every pro shot. But I think this is the first time I'm watching something as a pro shot in the digitized form where I know that there was a live audience at the same time watching this recording. And this is the first time where I'm like, I actually think the digital audience members, us, had a bit more of an advantage of not necessarily relating deeply, but connecting the pieces more than the people sitting in the actual theater itself. Because if you are the actual audience member who is in the theater, you are seeing a huge canvas of moving parts always. So even when Van goes to stage left, you may be distracted of what Nick is setting up on stage right. Or even when Nick is running to go up by the rafters, that might be distracting you from Van, like there's so much going on that even seeing the digitized pro shot, we got a scope into. I can only imagine like that would almost, I wonder, being in the live audience kind of cloud my attention or stringing the piece together because there's a lot of moving parts like set, costume, lights, genre, right? You're digesting that all at the same time. Whereas us as the digitized audience, we didn't have to digest that all at the same time. It was the switch of a camera lens, the snap of a finger. Okay, they're performing behind a green screen. Okay, they're now puppeteering the dogs in this beauty pageant. So it's for the first time that this is interesting. Like, I would genuinely recommend people watching the pro shot version of this show, maybe even more than seeing it in person, or see both to make this same comparison. And let me know if you're someone, get down in the comments if you're like, hey, I saw it and I watched it on Broadway HD and you're right, or like, you're so wrong, I got even more of an appreciation. Like, I'd love to know, because we've watched so many pro shots. That's part of the reason when we do these panels, like the beautiful advantage we all have of seeing theater shows behind a film screen because we couldn't be there or we're locked down, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm always like, okay, but I'm not in the audience, or I'm seeing like, okay, yeah, this is a very theatricalized, it's done for the theater piece that I just got to watch behind a camera screen. Whereas this one, I'm like, I feel like I had a huge advantage with the beautiful cinematography that the pro shotters did with this. That was a huge tangent, but yeah, that's just what I felt about. So definitely recommend this musical at whole, and also in particularly watching the pro shot.
Would you show it to your niece and nephew at some point in the future?
Yeah, when they're a little bit older, probably, just because, some of the terms, I don't know if they need to really unpack at this age.
They're too young to hear dag nabbit.
Yeah, well, I just don't my Ellis to be like, what's a Nazi? And to be like, I will explain that the best I can to a 4-year-old without completely exposing you to the dumpster fire of a world that we're in.
What they want.
But yeah, so I definitely think, though, like high school and like middle school kids and beyond can watch this. Like, I also think, like I said, it's such a beautiful piece of art. And again, acting students or like creatives, right? Seeing this and reminding people of what it's like to play and you have a passion and all the different forms. As someone who my brain is going a mile a minute always, and I always want to be doing so many projects all at the same time. What I like about this piece, it's like, oh, they kind of like did puppetry, postmodern-esque stuff, and a rock concert all at the same time. Cool. I guess you can put that all in one piece. Like, anything is possible. But yeah.
Perfect. Dewey?
Yeah, I would absolutely recommend this show to others, because like, as one thing that someone told me a long time ago is that, like, when you're having fun, the audience is having fun. And this is just a pure hour and a half of just fun. And I think it's just so easy to digest with so many different audiences, because like you do have the historical and, tragic parts of it, or, like the actual kind of explaining, not like obviously not in depth, but you get the gist of the Cold War. But at the same time, you have it in an amazing medium that you just want to rock out constantly with it, like the entire hour and a half. And like, yeah, like it felt so like, Jill, that's probably the one thing that I disagree with you on, is that I don't think it needed any more. Because for me, whenever I go to not as much plays, because I feel like it's so weird that I'm prepared to sit longer in plays than I am in movies, funny enough. But whenever a movie goes over 2.5 hours or even goes into 3-hour territory, my first critique is, why am I here for 3 hours? You show me this better not have any fat. And if I'm bored for more than 3 minutes, I get pissed off, because I'm like, no. You needed this edit to be this long? You didn't need that scene. So when this show gets right into it, right off the bat, hour and a half, you're in, you're out, you had an amazing time, it makes me just want to be like, oh yeah, that was good. That was perfect. So yeah, that's why I would recommend it today, because I think it's a very easy entry point for no matter who you are. If you're looking at something just for fun, looking at musical theater, if you're looking at theater, if you're looking at like just a devised piece that these two guys came up with, because like you said, it had all these different things in it, and you're like, oh yeah, I guess that can fit in the same show. Yeah, these guys did.
I think to answer to you, Dewey, too, when I was talking about the runtime, I can see the confusion. I didn't mean the actual time of the piece. I meant like the time it was in the theater. I wanted there from February. I wanted it to go like February to February 2023, baby. We're still, Space Dogs is still on Off-Broadway.
You know what's really funny is that I knew you made that distinction halfway through, but for some reason in my head, I went like, oh no, that's what she meant as soon as I started talking again.
That's okay. No, but to back you up on that, I do think it is such a beautifully, as much that is going on, like a beautifully succinct piece. And I stand by what you're saying too, Dewey, of like the minute something on stage, I guess it's kind of like terrible sort of back up against the wall thing that a lot of theater pieces have to kind of endure is, people might think this is too long. Or, for example, there's a dog thing happening right now in Toronto, 15 Dogs that Crow's Theater is doing. That is also fantastic theater. It is sold out. Good luck getting a ticket, but crawl, bark, chase your way to the theater.
Run has maybe ended by the time this episode comes
True.
out.
Yeah.
At time of recording, go see it. It's great.
But the only bad thing so far people have said about it is it might have been too long. I don't think it was, but it was almost 3 hours. So it's that thing, where people are like, if I'm bored, I stand by that. Like, if I'm bored, I'm here in person. You gotta make me want to be here in person. Totally.
Yeah, although I will say, they shouldn't have been in that theater as long. Their runtime should have been, their actual runtime should have been shorter. So that's my complaint.
To Jill's point, if the...
Totally joking, by the way.
No.
But to Jill's point, if it's maybe even better to see this in the pro shot as opposed to seeing it in the run, then their runtime has been extended in perpetuity to whenever anybody can access it through this filmic preserved archive version. Because, if that is the ideal way of encountering this piece, then, subscribe to Broadway HD, who actually produced this pro shot. There's a handful of pro shots on there that are produced by Broadway HD in particular. This is probably the only place to watch it. But
so it's so interesting. Again, this is just me going back more on what I was saying, but it's we know what digitized theater is now because of the pandemic and having to do Zoom theater and online forums. And we've all obviously known what live theater is, but that kind of epiphany I had of is this a different medium? Is this actors doing theater live purposefully for a digitized audience? What does that mean? I don't know. We'll just leave that as a rhetorical question. Mac?
I mean, what else can I say that hasn't already been said? This is a fantastic production, and I would say, as a devised theater student, this is a piece every one of those students should watch just to see how good devised theater is done. Because there's a lot of devised theater that's done that doesn't always hit its mark. But this incorporated so many elements of devised theater, from multimedia to puppetry to improv to music. It just incorporated so much and melded it all so well together that it's you could explore this from many different angles of devised theater and it would work really well. So for me, I just go, yes, watch it. This is such a fun piece of theater that you will walk away going, you learned something, you had your emotions toyed with, and it's got a dog. What more do you want? Honestly, it's got a lot of dogs. So I mean, it's a fantastic, fantastic show. I mean, absolutely, take it out, go see it. It's an hour and a half. It's very easy to watch, very easy to do. I watched it while on the treadmill, and it was a grand old time. A good bop
the whole time.
Did you speed race when you got to Werner von Braun?
No,
Did you have to crank it up all the way to 9? Okay.
No. I had a good steady pace throughout. That's the goal. There you go. As did the show. So yes, wonderful. Let's get into the next section, which is there are many different forms of theater that are used to execute the show, i.e. musical theater, puppetry, video projections, live feeds, devised improv, satirical characters, etc. How did the interaction between these modes impact your viewing experience? Jill, I'll let you start this one.
Well, I feel like I've already kind of answered that question in my last little side tangent. No, but I guess just to add, again, it just it added to the brilliance of what was happening on stage. I guess all of these different modes didn't have to be present for the storytelling. I think this very easily could have been a bog standard play between chief designer and Leica. It could have all been done through puppetry. It could have, most of it could have been improv, and then they do the classic improv thing where they take facts and then they make something out of it. But the fact that all of these mediums were working with each other, it brings me to another thing I haven't mentioned yet, but it almost allows the theater to not be there. And what I mean by that is there's the moment when I think it's near the very beginning when Van and Nick are hey, we're here, we're standing on this stage. We're trying to talk about history. But hey, this is history. We're making history right now. Like, very instantly, they punch through the fourth wall. The fourth wall does not exist. And like, they are basically owning up to, okay, we're actors, but actually we're just Nick and Van, and we're going to just like talk about this thing, and it's going to be really fun. And I think by them kind of setting it up that way, it really did strip like any pomp and circumstance or like a caged box version of what theater is. And the fact that they pepper in all these different genres and modes of storytelling, again, it's going farther and farther away of like, what is this piece? What is it doing? It's doing what it's doing. It's like purposefully using these fragmented points of time, people, all within, you know, a relatively same time frame. Like, we're all of these things are happening on a stage, but there's different voices on stage too, right? Like, we have Americans, we have Germans, we have Russians, we have people, we have dogs. And these things, these people express a different way. So I think using all of the different mediums of theater, or that which we know to be forms of theater, just explains that even more. And I think it also, from, I guess, like a historical school point of view, we all have different ways of learning and absorbing information too. And so I think what's really neat about this piece too is there's every single audience member is going to leave the space with, no pun intended, with like something that stood out to them, or maybe they might be leaving up the whole package was great to them, but it just adds like another level of storytelling, I guess, in fragmented form, just as much as the story itself is fragmented historical facts. End essay. I'm TED talking up the wazoo in this episode. Apologies, but we got a lot to say.
All good. Dewey, what are your thoughts?
I loved it. Like, once again, I'm rereading the question because I'm like, I feel like I'm just keep on saying, oh, I loved it.
That's valid.
Yeah, it's a valid point.
I think the interaction between these different modes and all these different genres that they had within the show, I think it's another example about why this show is so accessible and why I think anyone can come in and watch it. Because if you're a history buff, you got your history in here. If you're a comedy guy, oh my God, is it funny? And then if you're into musical theater, these numbers are amazing. And then if you're a tech person, the tech and stuff that they use, the design is incredible. Like, there is nothing in this show that would leave someone saying it's, you know, it's not good. Like, I think no matter what, whether if there's something that you think that there could have been better or not, this is a fun show. Yeah. And there's something to bring everyone in at some point. So, because another thing that I also love about musical theater, and also just kind of like more playful theater, is that I can see just about anyone coming to a show and they will be like, oh, maybe theater isn't that bad. Because I know I have those old, like, kind of family members and distant cousins and stuff that, you know, if we go to see Shakespeare, if we go to see a devised theater piece, like you were saying earlier, Mac, like, they get a little turned off by it. Where I'm like, no, this is a perfect example. Like, it's not, it doesn't always have to be one thing, because this show is everything, and it's amazing.
Yeah. That's so funny, Dewey. I would definitely show this if someone was like, oh, theater is this. I'd be like, oh, watch this show. Theater can do all of this. Yeah. At the same time.
Yeah.
Exactly. Ryan?
Yeah, like, it's so funny that you both say that, because, you know, yes, this is such a different theater piece than I think most people think of theater being, but I also kind of feel like the confluence of all of these elements is, like, I jokingly used the term Gesamtkunstwerk earlier, because why not? But honestly, I think it's using all of these elements precisely justifies this piece as a work of theater. Because you could, like, you know, write a very interesting book about the space race, or maybe like a graphic novel, and that way you could play with all these fun elements. Or you could read a Wikipedia article about the Russian space program and the dogs. But this piece is no Wikipedia article, and I think all of these elements really just justify we're doing this on the stage. Let's milk out every little bit of magic the stage has to offer. And every little piece of that, in addition to congealing into this just big whole of just this fun, burlesque-y, wacky experience, really just does add something to that calculus. Like, I don't know, the puppets, for example, to use one very, like, pure theater element. I think, like, we did an episode on Warhorse, and I said all of my thoughts about Warhorse there, but the fact that, you couldn't make this as a movie in the same way because you would need real dogs, or at least CG dogs.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do this with puppets in the theater very easily, and that is this, like, just pure theater element that wouldn't work in a movie the same way. And you could, humanize these characters and have them conversing with the human characters, the dogs, that is, and, nobody would bat an eye if it's done with a puppet in the theater, as you would if it was done in a film that way. And yeah, like other things, like all the multimedia, that just plays into the sci-fi-ness of it all. The fact that we are dealing with a moment when science and progress and technology was a huge part of what was happening here, so we need to have some of that in the show. And theater over the past several decades has gotten very good at integrating all this technology into itself, so you could get all of that in there too.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it's a musical is just, what do they always say about musicals? That, when the emotions are so high you can't speak, you have to sing. That's every part of this show gets us to that point. What were some of the other elements? Even the improv. Like, I know we had our little debate earlier about whether or not we thought that improv was genuine or not, but just the fact that they have at least the outward signifiers of improv, regardless of whether or not the substance of it is true, I think that speaks to the randomness of history, that you don't know where this is going. It could happen a different way if somebody says or does a different thing. So much of the plot is about that. So yeah, like I just love how not only have they taken advantage of all these elements to make just this pure work of theatrical bliss, but that there seems to be thought into what each of these components is really adding to the piece beyond just let's throw it all in a blender because postmodernism, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ryan, did you like this musical, or?
I love this musical.
Could not tell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the choice to do all these different methods of theater really worked well with this particular story because of the zany, wild, unhinged nature that drove the space race.
Yeah.
Like, the energy, the chaotic energy that was bottled and exploded out during this time of great change, great scientific advancement was huge. And doing it as a traditional, either rock opera or dance piece or multimedia show, just wouldn't have felt enough of the energy that was really kind of creating this unhinged energy. So, like, by the time you get to the end of Chief Designer's life and he's sweaty and he's just looks defeated, it's like, oh, it's because the actor, having done this, like, chaotic show, is probably feeling the same way and is ready to, like, have his own heart attack and drop off the stage, Like, each style is used to highlight a different element of the story, too. Like, the puppetry allows the audience to connect with the dogs, when typically you wouldn't have that perspective. You then have the video projections that kind of represent the news media and the way kind of media fed into both these stories of garnering the fear between the USSR and the USA. Because the media very much played a role in that kind of feeding the fears that both these countries had of each other and egging it on to such an extent. And then, of course, you have the wonderful satirization of so many historical figures just to kind of elevate the story and, as we said, kind of take a little bit of the darkness out of the piece and let it kind of be light enough that it moves through a lot of history at a very good pace, because you get bogged down in facts really easily. And I mean, that's what a lot of great kind of historical films will do, is they will find a way to kind of heighten some of the characters to move things along. Like, a great example of that is a really funny film called, I don't know if you guys have seen this, called The Death of Stalin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
See, Ryan knows what it is. You know it too?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So it's a very funny movie. But once again, like, that typically would have taken like 6 months to like 3 years of history. They condensed that into a 90-minute film, and the ridiculousness that went into what happened after the death of Stalin is perfectly heightened enough that you don't feel quite so tragic and just the atrocities that took place afterwards, right? It's that same energy of, here, actually, Khrushchev appears in both pieces, funny enough. So Stalin. So that's the whole thing there of, you're able to take a lot of his history and lighten it up just enough with that great satirization of characters. That's very Monty Python-esque. It's improvised, like, it all, like, they specifically chose different elements to represent different aspects of the story, and they all just perfectly fit together into a solid piece. So bravo. All right, next question. This piece presents cheeky perspectives on history, both the history of the space race in particular, but also the concept of history in general. What are your thoughts on its depictions of history as content and or history as theme? Ryan, as our professor, TA extraordinaire here, give us your thoughts on this. This feels like a very academic Ryan question.
Yes, this is. Oh, geez, if I pull a full Warhorse and just lecture for
Oh boy.
far too long. No. Unlike Warhorse, that one I came in with like 7 pages of handwritten notes. This one I am improving, much like they may or may not do in this show. Yeah, so okay, where do I even begin?
Oh boy.
Let's go back to the quote that Jill mentioned a moment ago of "We are living in history right now. History is tactile." That is a line that is said in this show pretty early on about just, I think, as something of a thesis statement that sets up, yes, we are talking about the specific moment in history or slew of moments in history, but it's really just about putting history as a concept under the microscope. And that's something that has always been very big in theater, but it's actually very big in theater right now, I would say, and especially in the US of A, between two great oceans. And I think this trend, it's not really new, but it's manifesting in a lot of new ways. And, okay, to back it up even more academically, okay, postmodernism got really big. It started like after World War II, kind of into the 1960s. It really got off the ground, but got really big in the 90s, and especially with its influence in postmodern historiography. This guy, Hayden White, maybe you've heard of him. He wrote this big book called Meta History and then a whole bunch of other essays. And he was one of the first big scholars to really hammer home the idea that history has a lot more with fiction, not just in terms of content, but in terms of the discursive practices we use to tell history. The narrative and plotment, putting things in order, making a story out of the raw facts or the raw data of facts about the past is a mode of storytelling that takes a lot more from fictional practices than it does from anything not fictional. And it was a big thing. There was a lot of debate in academia about it, but this idea had a lot of impact on the types of history plays we saw manifesting in the 90s. Like Tom Stoppard's Arcadia is often pointed to as one of these big plays that is about the way we tell history in this way. And The History Boys by Alan Bennett is another big one. I don't need to unpack these other plays in this review of Space Dog very comprehensively. But yeah, so much of the scholarship on history plays from the 90s is really all about this. It's about there was a fundamental rupture caused by postmodern philosophy that changed the way people viewed history, made it seem a lot less stable than it was, and the theater of the time was responding to that. Something interesting has been happening, I think, in the 21st century that I am, in my scholarship, trying to get a handle on what specifically we might call this. I'm not really one who likes diagnosing what may have or has or will come after postmodernism, if we have even gotten there yet. But I think there's a different trend in history that is sort of acting simultaneously against this, but also against the thing that came against this, and that was documentary theater, which became very big also in the 90s, but especially exploded into the early aughts, like things like the Laramie Project, of course, which, hey, Jill and Dewey were both in, and Gross Indecency and Stuff Happens. And a lot of these plays were, in a way, pushing against this tradition of, we can't possibly know what happened for sure. And I think they were very much approaching it from this place of, no, we have to believe that truth exists and can be accessed. The problem is partisan media perspective, putting their own angle on it. That's what's leading to the thing that in the Trump administration came to be known as post-truth and alternate facts, is that people are in their little bubbles. They're only watching certain news, reading certain news, seeing what comes on their feed. And that's where all the misinformation is coming from. But we shouldn't go so far to say that truth itself cannot be stably ascertained. And I feel like there's a lot of plays like this, like a whole bunch of others that I'm personally interested in researching, that are trying to find the middle ground between these two perspectives, that are very interested in the facts of history, but are also interested in the mechanisms by which we engage with those facts. And like this fact-checking apparatus has become very central in a lot of theater. I think the best known example that a lot of people probably are already thinking of while I say this is Hamilton, this musical that is about a specific moment in history, but the way we engage with history is constantly coming. When our children tell our story, they'll tell the story of tonight, and the song Burn, where Eliza Hamilton burns the letters. May future historians wonder how Eliza reacted when you broke her heart. That song isn't just about Eliza is sad because her husband publicly cheated on her, but it's about how historians don't actually know if she was sad. Probably that's presumably why she burned them, but without those letters that were burned, we don't have the sources that can tell us anything for certain. And it's really complicating these textual traces, the way we engage with history. And I think this piece is maybe leaning a little more on this documentary theater positivistic perspective of, like, for example, the moment about peeing on Sputnik 1, that the chief designer peed on it. They break the fourth wall to say, and this really happened. And a lot of these plays do things like this, where they, like, this might sound like one of the more outlandish things that we probably made up, but we want to alert your attention to the fact that this actually happened. But then the fact that we are getting into the heads of the dogs and trying to wonder, what did Leica think? Obviously, this didn't really happen. And it's the way that the play negotiates the boundary between these two things just makes it, simultaneously something that's trying to teach you about history while making it very clear but what we're telling is also a work of fiction, and you can't take any of this on face value, and you really have to, if you're excited by what you learn, there's other ways of doing your own research, but this is a great, spoonful of sugar to get the history pill to go down. Sorry, there's more I could say, but I've been ranting. Please, somebody else cut me off.
Dewey?
Yeah, I mean, like, literally what you just said, Ryan, at the very end there, it kind of sums it up for me, is that this is a little spoonful of sugar for you to take with your medicine of history. Like, yeah, I think anything that, because then, like I said earlier, like, it makes it more accessible. But this is something that this is another reason why I fell in love with comedy from a young age. Like, comedy is kind of like that's my thing that got me into, the entertainment and art industry, period, was that I always believe that comedy is its strongest when it's anchored in something real and when it's anchored into a bigger purpose or a bigger meaning. And I think this show does that perfectly with anchoring itself in a piece of history. Our medium is through the dog story and musical of the dogs. But the Cold War was, like, all respect to Leica and the rest of the dogs, but, like, the Cold War was bigger than that. Like, this was an actual moment in history where we thought stuff was going to go down and people were terrified for their lives. And it's anchored in this amazing, fun, as weird as that sounds to say, fun and boisterous, rock and roll musical. And that's all hidden within that. So yeah, yes, it is a good musical. Yes. I just feel like people are saying that. But so I think it's incredible with how it actually delivers its content and history through its medium.
Perfect. Jill?
Yeah, to kind of bottle up what both of you have already said, I know this is something that, like, Ryan and I have had these conversations outside of this piece too, but when I think of history, and I feel like those of us sitting on this panel right now, like, we were first, at least in the educational system here in Canada, were introduced to history via a textbook. And honestly, in grade school, for us sitting here in this panel too, we probably didn't have access to internet or the ways in which the internet can be stretched and massaged to find facts. So the only way we grew up digesting history was whatever pages of the textbook that was arbitrarily chosen for us to explore. And that's not to say, like, that's still great. We were able to be introduced to the histories and digest whatever we could. And you could read every single morsel of text that are in those textbooks. But you are, especially as Canadians, we're finding even more and more in depth now, getting a skewed perspective on Canadian history. I'm just using that as an anecdote, it's skewed, right? Because there is only that one pen and paper that is like, okay, great, I've learned about that, check the box. Nowadays, we are living in an age where not only are other histories being unearthed, and rightfully so, and being given a voice and a platform, and I'm not even talking theatrically, I'm just talking about historically, but also the ways in which we can digest our histories. The form has changed not only to the World Wide Web, but now through different apps of learning, or different, for example, TikTok or Snapchat, or these things where people are already presenting pieces of thought or pieces of thought from past or present or even future, and putting them in a TikTok video. And I've had these conversations with Brian of like, oh my gosh, like in 40 years, 60 years, is some of like what was kind of accrued together to be the history for us to learn in, as little tykes in the aughts. In like 40 and 60 years, are some TikTok videos or revelations via podcast, or the modes of history are changing, right? Like the way we're digesting history, the exposure, the unearthing, it's all so, so, so different, and rightfully so. And I honestly think just exponentially is going to change. There's so many more mediums in which we can digest our past or unearth our past. And so what's beautiful about this piece is, I think right there, like history as content and or history. Siri, see, there you go. Siri thinks I was talking to her. So Siri's probably like, what can I look up for you about history? Thank you for being at my disposal, Siri. We may be having conversations with AI bots in the next, 10 years. Who knows? But yeah, so history as content and history as theme, like this piece does that. And through the medium of theater, like think of now like forum theater. Theater is being used as educational tools, like actively. There was a huge surge of that, at least up here in Canada over the pandemic, of, well, let's put on forum theater for schools, or let's get kids, students in a classroom via Zoom, have actors act something out as if they are students on Zoom learning about a piece of history. It's so layered now, right? And I think we just unpacked it in this conversation too, using theater as this is a medium of telling history, but also layers of theater to tell this history. So that's a big old, what is history now, and how do we write our history, and what will history look like, and how is it changing? I think this piece does that, both in the way it presents itself, and then, like Dewey was just saying too, the content, and we've all said this too, of throwing it through this lens of a dog and a man and a dog's relationship. But yet the underbelly is every single human being in the 50s and 60s was grasping on to their desk chair, albeit a student or mom or dad at home or working their 9-to-5 job, wondering if they need to duck and cover. Like there was that, like everybody was sitting on the edge of their seat of like doom and gloom. The apocalypse could happen like in five seconds, So I'm going on a huge tangent again, but I think this piece knows what it's doing. It is unpacking history in a different way. And I think we are starting to do that now. I think it is needed to do that now. And I'm excited and intrigued to see how exponentially unveiling history is going to expose itself over the next couple of years.
Very good.
Head talk number 4 in the books.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'll just say this piece just shows how history is all about perspective. As Jill said, there's only one pen, one paper, and it's all about who's telling this particular story at this particular time. And then we go back and reevaluate that perspective and go, they missed this. We got to add that back into the story. So, I mean, like during the Cold War in class, we were always taught it from kind of the North American perspective of, Wernher von Braun, great guy, solid scientist who helped to get us to the moon and beat those damn dirty Russians, but then you get this piece that goes, oh, wait, hold on a minute. This was let's give chief designer here his due in creating and adding on, because he's the one that kind of egged everybody else on. he's the one that figured out how to get Sputnik into space, which then in turn inspired the Americans, and they all fed each other, So it's one of those things of equaling out the history. And I think that's what this piece does really well, is evening out the story enough that you get kind of a both sides picture of how both sides kind of inspired, antagonized, and kind of drove each other manically to getting to this really kind of out there mission where it was putting a man on the moon. Like, that was like, yeah, of course we'll get a man on the moon. Like JFK's big quote, right? Like, it's, we choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it is hard, right? And it's one of those things of, we were at a time, we were at the end of the war, we were kind of still judged up, ready to kind of conquer the next thing, beat the next battle, and space was the chosen frontier. So it was, how do we get there, right? And so this is a great piece that shows how both sides kind of drove themselves to get to this next point in our humankind evolution of exploration. We'd explored the world, except for the seas. There's still a lot to explore into the water. But we were looking to the stars.
On it. It's fine.
It's true. But it's like, man looked to the stars, and it was like, okay, somebody finally decided, okay, we're going to get there. But to that, we got to instill the fear of God in each other and drive each other to this extent to get to that point. So, it's a great example of how all our history books need to be reviewed and kind of remove that nationalistic revisions that have been done over the years and kind of just go back down to the Walter Cronkite brass tacks of, here's the facts. They did this, they did this. It's not so much about whose side won, whose side lost, because, both sides had major achievements. It's more just about, hey, both sides did good things. Both sides did not so good things to get to where they had to be, So it's like, everybody's hands are dirty. Nobody's hands are clean. History is a gray zone. We were taught that stories are heroes and villains, and that, yet when you get older, you realize, oh no, the story is more like what we saw in this piece. It's chaotic. It's unhinged. There are weird and wacky elements like peeing on the Sputnik. Because, why not? Like, there's tragic elements to the story, right? Like, not everything ends happily. Not every dog gets its steak. Some dogs never come home. But it's like, that's the thing you get as you get older, is this more rounded gray perspective of the world. And, I think that's what this piece is trying to tell people, is it's never too late or too early to start going into history with a bit more of a complex lens and to look at all sides of the story. Don't just choose the side that makes you feel good, feel happy, because there are sides to every story. And so that's what I think this piece is about. It's depiction of history. It's kind of saying, go back, reread your history books, like go back and reevaluate this story. Because, there are elements of the story that just get left out because it doesn't fit the narrative of the moment. It's like, no, the narrative is this. Like, people showed up, they did this. It's like, that's what we need to know, not we showed up and we conquered, It's like, no, they showed up, they fought, this side won, this side lost more men, ergo they lost. It's like, it's kind of just focus on the facts. And this piece kind of shows how you can focus on the facts in a fun way. It doesn't have to be just dry dates and names and times. It can be told in a really unique and fascinating way that will inspire people to go home and read more of Leica's story and the story of Chief Designer, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name.
Well, that was also part of the point. This kind of feeds into the strategies I was talking about. They wouldn't tell us his name. And they said, like,
till the very end.
People didn't find it, like, people in the real world did not find out this guy's name until years after his death because it was classified. So therefore, we will not tell you his name in this production. So, like, and that's part of interesting because it's like applying the lens of its own time on the way we're being allowed to engage with the story. It's not saying we're in the future now, we know this guy's name, so that this is who he is. It's saying that its history is tactile, but it's also, you kind of have to pinpoint specific moments and see how were things perceived in the time, and not just how we can look back on them with fresh 2020 goggles.
Yeah, exactly. But there we go. All right, let's get to the last question, though. And Dewey, you seem like a dog man. So I think you'll start this question, which is, what does this play tell us about the relationship between humans and dogs?
Well, I would say probably that dogs have 4 legs. We have 2. But
the play is very clear about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the relationship between dogs and humans, let alone animals and humans, has always been great and also sad at the same time, because we have domesticated animals to the point where some of them are our best friends now. we've domesticated other animals to the point where, oh, maybe we should not have done that. Maybe these things are also living beings that deserve to live just as we do. But yeah, dogs are obviously an animal that we have domesticated, and a lot of us do treat with respect and love and are big parts of our lives now. But I think that was one of the other anchors to the show, that we could get people into such a crazy topic of the Cold War, like what we were saying earlier, 5 seconds to world destruction. Was a little cute animal that we all now know and love, was the way that we could have sympathy towards these dogs that were tested on, but also to a really dark point in our history as well for just humans, for how we treated other humans. And is still obviously relevant today, which is even crazier. But so, yeah. I don't know if I answered anything there, but
I'll piggyback off you, because you kind of hit on an important point of my note, which is, I mean, this whole piece is a full display of how in the course of humanity's drive to achieve a goal, we are willing to sacrifice a creature that is so trusting in its nature that we are willing to kind of go, it trusts us. So ergo, Laika will get into the space probe not really knowing what is expected. And it's because scientists were like, well, we can't put a human in there. I mean, the Nazis did that during the Holocaust, and that was horrible. They were doing all these scientific tests on people. We can't do that, but we'll use a dog, because a dog can't respect, and it's not as bad. I mean, but then it's like, just because they can't protest and say, I don't want to do this, they're still a creature, a living being. And the fact that the scientist knew that Laika wasn't coming back. This dog that he professed to love and promised steak and made sure they had good water and that they were well fed and taken care of. Even during his most stressful times of his life, he made sure those dogs were taken care of. But only then did he strap them into machines that either blew up, never came back down from orbit, or everything else. It just shows that humanity has a really cruel side to it, that if something can't speak up and look after itself, humanity kind of bulldozes it, its own drive for, success. Like even LBJ goes, well, we won't use a dog because that's just cruel. Unlike those Russians. But it's okay, we'll use monkeys and bears because that makes it better. Yeah. It's like, no, like monkeys share more DNA with us than a dog does. Like they are.
That makes it worse.
That makes it worse. Or this bear, whatever did this bear do to deserve to be strapped into a rocket and then blew up? Honestly, it just shows the double standard that humanity has, where this scientist wasn't willing to put his own life into Sputnik and fly up there, but he was okay to put a dog in there. It's it just shows the cruelty that underlies humanity of, yes, we are top of the food chain, but the way we get there, there's so much blood on our hands. There's a great meme that goes around on Facebook and Instagram every once in a blue moon, and it's of the African white rhino, I think, is the animal, where it's it survived thousands and millions of years of evolution, or it survived 5 extinctions, events, but it couldn't survive humanity. And it's that's exactly it. Humanity didn't care that the rhino had survived thousands and millions of years. We just wanted that damn horn of ivory. So, well, it's like sharks. We want that shark fin soup. So, we don't care that we're hurting the sharks and drowning them in the ocean by taking the fins, and that's it. It's humanity has a very cruel side. We profess to be good, loving nature people, but it's no, we're okay to chop down a forest. We're okay to strap a dog and send it into space without it coming home for our own blind ambitions. Because, hey, we got to beat the other guys to the same goal. It's it's just horrible. It's horrible. This really highlighted the dark, horrible side of humanity and I mean, everybody's capable of it. Nobody
that's the thing.
is
I also
exempt.
Yeah, because the other thing, sorry to interrupt there, Mac, but also one thing I want to make clear also to the listeners, I am also not a vegetarian. I do eat meat, so I understand.
Me too.
I also understand the contradiction within all of this, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're seeing this as these were we are the top of the food chain, and look at us for doing all these other killings and stuff and using these animals for things that aren't food and other things that are just out of pure, I wonder. And
well, it's the whole movement that in the 90s of this makeup, this shampoo, this eyeliner was not tested on animals, and that was a big deal that it had that seal of approval. It's like, that should never been a thing in the first place. Well, you never gave us the right to strap a rabbit down to a table and say, hey, let's see how much this hurts the rabbit's eyes to, put soap in it. It's like, what cruelty. Like, we all have that darkness within us, and we're all willing to turn a blind eye because we wanted that shampoo. We wanted to go to the moon. We wanted to, beat the Russians or beat the Americans. We were A-okay to, the musical kind of glosses over the fact that, until the very end where it shows all the dogs that died. But it's like, there's a lot of dogs that they went through. And they were stray dogs, too. It's like, we're not going to take somebody's pet. No, we're going to take a stray dog that had no home, and then we're going to love it and train it, and then we're just going to shoot it into space and blow it up. It's horrible. It really does show the dark, depraved side of humanity's long-running struggle to achieve something. Jill, I see you thinking.
I have two kind of grandiose questions or sort of rhetorical things or statements.
Okay.
Isn't it funny? Not funny, I guess it's not the right word. Isn't it astonishing the lengths to which a human being will go to when under the pressure cooker of fear? I'm just going to put that out there. Fear makes us do crazy shit to the nth degree and to the macro degree and to the micro degree. It's all out of fear. If you think about this piece in general, even the scientists, even the soldiers, everyone was like, we need a distraction. Otherwise, we are going to implode quite literally as an Earth. Everybody now has the formula for nukes. So let's start another race. Let's be better. I'm scared that my power is going to be lost. I'm scared that I will be blown up. I'm scared to lose this lover. I am scared to, to not be successful. I'm scared to not make a living. When fear is present, humans will go to their nth degree. And there's varying degrees of humans. And as we know, some of them are the worst of the worst. But there's that kind of statement. And then also talking about how dogs, humans have domesticated these animals to be their loyal, trained pals. And we're at the top of the food chain. Who's training us? It's funny in this question of what does this play tell us about the relationship between humans and dogs? Well, tells us that the thing that's more trained or has kind of a grasp on what they were made to be or what they want to be, they're pretty good at it, and they're pretty loyal, and they're pretty kind, and they're pretty compassionate. When you train a dog, it will bark, it will roll over, it will cuddle in your lap. Who's training the humans? Right? So that's just such an interesting thing that's bubbled up in this whole conversation of, especially with this question of what does this play tell us about the relationship between humans and dogs? It's we have a hell of a lot more to learn from dogs. And the fact that this whole musical is called Space Dogs, right? I'm always obsessed with a title. Why is a play called what it's called or what have you? And yeah, it's literally about the dogs that went to space from a literal perspective, but space dogs too, right? Dog tags, the dogs meaning US versus Russia. It's, this sort of canine in the dog ring, wildness of the dog. Humans are more than the dogs we know them to be today are. So anyways, that's my TA nugget that I'm putting in. And Ryan, volleying it to the other TA. Yes. I'm not a TA at all, but I thought that was pretty profound.
Ryan, take us home. Unlike Leica.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
Wow, too soon.
I didn't like that, man.
Okay, yeah, so the thing that I love about this, we get a song that's literally the history of dogs, or just takes us back to how did these wolves essentially become man's best friend? What is the process by which we, domesticated them, trained them, and made them very loyal to us, so loyal that we could put them in a pod and shoot them into the stratosphere. And I love that so much of this musical is hinged on the idea of man's best friend. That is the big blanket statement that we tend to ascribe to all dogs, our relationship to our dogs. And like, it's funny because the beating heart of this piece is the relationship between Chief Designer and Laika. She is his best friend, and the heartbreaking pathos of it comes from the fact that he had to make the tough decision to send his friend into space. And then she haunts him after of, was it worth it? And he doesn't have a good answer to that. But like, it goes back to the history thing for me, because I'm not going to take it for granted just because I saw it in this play that the Chief Designer actually did love Laika. It's a cute story, and maybe it's true, but I don't know if it's true. Maybe I'll research it more, maybe I won't. As of yet, I have not. But it would be very cute if it was true, and if I find out that it was, that would just tickle my corn, but that's not an expression.
Tickle my corn. Corn here, everybody.
It would make me happy to find out that's true. But even if it's not, like, I'm not saying this play lied about history or got the facts wrong.
I'm going to say streets ahead.
No, streets ahead. Speaking of weird expressions. But yeah, I love that they said, okay, we have this story about dogs, a moment in history when dogs were very important. What do we think about dogs? What do we feel towards our dogs? What is this, complicated relationship? And well, if dogs are man's best friend, let's make this a story about a man and his best friend, the dog. And if that man is the Chief Designer and the dog is the one who he's going to have to sacrifice, it's really kind of milked this very sad story out of something that maybe the humans involved in it didn't even bat an eye at or think about. It found a way to take the way we already relate to our dogs and make the story about how would you feel if your dog was the one who won the beauty pageant and had to be shot into space. And if you are the one behind that, but compounding all of these historical and militaristic and political pressures on you, could you make that decision to prevent mutually assured destruction, a term he coined? And it's, again, not to bring up Warhorse again, but it's a thing I said about the anthropomorphism of Joey in Warhorse back in that episode, is we are kind of forcing our human subjectivity onto these animals when we give them a voice and narration and try to think, what would they say in this circumstance? It's a well-meaning attempt to give voice back to the voiceless animal, but at the same time, it's also saying, well, as a human, this is what I would think, but we can't really get into the head of a dog. We can never know what a dog or a horse would say. That's, I'm speaking mostly about the novel that Warhorse the play was adapted from, because that, chose to remove the horse's voice, in which we discussed at length. But here, like, Laika has a voice, all the dogs have a voice, and we are given this idea of, I just want a home, I just want a family, that's what I want. And I think that's the right choice thematically for what this story is trying to say, that the dog doesn't care about the Soviet Union or the space race or America. She just wants a family and she just wants a steak. And in Warhorse, like we talked about how this is also the case, that it's almost the horse was the perfect neutral participant for telling the story of the First World War, a story where we often talk about how in this moment in history, there were good Germans and bad Germans, good, Western powers and bad Western powers. And, Joey, when he, gets taken in by the Germans, Joey the Warhorse, and he doesn't have a moment of, oh no, these are the bad soldiers. I am a British horse. This is bad for me. He's like, oh no, this German soldier is being nice to me. The last person I was with was, British and wasn't nice to me. He doesn't think in terms of these national dichotomies. He just gravitates towards the goodness in humans. And I think that is, something very similar is happening in this play, that Laika doesn't care about the politics. She's a dog. Dogs don't think in these petty human squabbles the way we do, and yet we use them as these tools for serving our ends in these squabbles. Yeah. So we should be nicer to our best friends, I guess, is what the play is trying to say.
Indeed we should. Indeed we should. On that note, let's all give our sign off for the day. And if you have a favorite type of dog, you can tell us what that is so we end on a happy note too. Jill, you can go first.
Sure. Yeah. My socials where you can check out what's going on with Jill. You can follow my artist Instagram account at Jillian.Robinson96. By the time this episode goes out, I feel like this festival will have gone and passed, but I'll say it anyways. Currently, right now, at this recording, I'm in rehearsals for the Women at Plays Festival happening here in Toronto at Red Sandcastle Theatre. Shows going on February 10th to the 19th, and I'm playing Officer Dunn in a new play called Missing You. It's directed by Susan Locke, who was a past panelist here at the Cup.
On the Warhorse episode.
And on the Warhorse episode, there you go. So that's been going super well. It's a contemporary drama, so that's a medium, a genre of theater I have not been in a while. I've been in a lot of pantos and Shakespeare, and so it's been really lovely to kind of go into the sort of cranial, psychological space of humans. And they are pretty terrible, and they are fearful, and they search for love. And on that note, a dog that I love, I have to say one in particular. I doubt he'll ever watch this, but Ron Roma Melendez, if you're watching this, Ron is a dear friend, American actor of mine. I met doing the digital restoration series that I was working on through the bulk of 2020, 2021. Ron has a dog. His name is Lou, and he's a pit bull, and he is the sweetest. His nickname is a hippo because he literally looks like a baby hippo, and he is the sweetest and will just either lay on a couch. When we were doing like recordings for the digital restoration series, Ron was our lead and a lot of stuff like the Rover, the Man of Mode, etc. So he would have some meaty pieces of text where he had to kind of go all in, especially it being on Zoom platform, and it was an audio drama. Like he had to be quite articulate, what have you. And Lou would I would ask, like, Lou's in the room, like, is he spooked or whatever? And Ron would say, no, he's right here. And he would like pan his camera down, and Lou's just like sitting like right beside him, just loving it and lapping it all in. And it's just this pit bull, which again, pit bulls get such a bad rap. Ron actually does really good work of like advocating for pit bulls and stuff. And I've never met this dog. I've also never met Ron in the flesh, but I've never met this dog, and I really want to, because I feel like he would just be a big, cuddly, lovey-dovey best friend, as all dogs should be treated. So, Lou, this one's for you.
Lou. Whoa! Dewey, what's your sign-off, sir?
My sign-off today is, if you want to follow me or anything like that, I mainly use Instagram. It's at Dewey Stew, at DEWEYSTEW. As far as things coming up, I have an improv show tomorrow night at Comedy Bar, which would have already happened by the time this is aired. So thanks. It went great. You can maybe see me at Medieval Times very soon on the horse because my legs are feeling it. So hopefully that means it's working. And then aside from that, I have a big callback audition bright and early tomorrow morning for a Toronto sports team gig. So if I didn't get it in the future, then at least you guys all know at least I tried.
You did.
Woo!
You did. And also you'll be doing a lot of shows during March break at Medieval Times.
I will be, well, hopefully on the horse. If not, then I will be there as Cedric. So that's cool.
There you go.
Come
on out.
And then come on out, because Macca also works there with me.
I do, but you won't see me. I'm backstage.
I'm
in the office.
Horse, Mac. I would love
I'm
to
not
see
on a
you.
horse.
I was gonna say, unless if I like fall and get in a really bad accident, Mac's gonna be my understudy. He'll be there and ready.
I'll do it in Russian accent.
Hey,
we were set in Spain.
That makes no sense. Also, that knocking noise is me knocking on wood, because the stage manager in me is, please, Dewey, do not get injured.
Oh, I really don't want to. I really don't want to. But aside from that, my very last thing I'll say is I love all dogs. I love pretty much almost all animals. But my favorite is a French bulldog. And I am currently watching through Modern Family for the first time, and Stella steals my heart every single episode.
She does.
Oh,
cute.
So good. So
I
good.
want her.
Wonderful. And Ryan, Chief Dozana Ryan, give us a classic Ryan Borochovitz send-off.
Sure. Not easy to find on social media. Well, you could find me, but you're not missing much by not following me. Just send all that love to Cup of Hemlock instead. That's at COH Theater on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're watching this on YouTube, watch it on YouTube like you just did. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, you missed my fun dog shirt. Speaking of my fun dog shirt, my favorite dog is the one on my shirt, Dachshunds. They're fun. They look like hot dogs. I think they're adorable.
Very good. Very good. And you can find me on all social media platforms at Mackenzie Horner. You can follow my musical antics over at Before the Downbeat, a musical podcast. And my favorite type of dog is the English Bulldog.
Lots of bulldog
Yeah.
fans here. Love it.
Yes, very much like Winston Churchill. They're so ugly, they're cute.
I hate to
Shaggy.
put a damper on this happy note you wanted to end on by talking about dogs, but that is a product of human breeding and eugenics that we have forced them to look that cute at the detriment of their respiratory systems.
Yes.
So,
Well, they are fixing that now.
Right.
They are going back and correcting that error.
yes,
So bulldogs are on their way back. They have gotten much better health-wise. I keep tabs on that because I also was reading about that too.
okay.
Because I'm like, they are very cute. They are very cute. They're so ugly, they're cute. And the snorting and the snoring, and they are just very lovable dogs. So all for it. Anyway, on this happier note, we say adieu. We will see you in the stars. And we should now I'll go have some steak in honor of Leica. So
This is for you.
cheers, cheers, cheers.
Like a
Cheers.
For Leica. Cheers. Thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.